All right, let's look at the review ones real quick. They are from section 6.1 when we were doing them. So remember how to do these? What do I need to do on the first review one? Factor out a what?
GCF.
And what would our GCF be? What number do they all have in common? Higher than 2. A 6. Oh, I'm trying. Am I echoing?
Yeah.
I don't. Am I?
We can hear your voice through there.
Through that?
There's like a double going on.
See if this goes away. Is it better now?
Yeah.
I don't know why that would do. That's weird.
Turn all the way up.
I can't, if I turn that thing up, it just like does a bunch of like knots. It's really like, it's weird. But okay, so 6, right? Everybody said. I'm trying to record it as I do this. If this thing will work. What variable do I take out? A b, right? So we're gonna take out a 6b, and we are left with 3b squared minus 7bx minus 4x squared. So sometimes you just take out the greatest common factor. Down on the second one, you first look for a greatest common factor if they have one. They don't have one in this case, so we're just going to factor by grouping, remember? So group the first 2 and the last 2. What does our first group have in common?
Like 3.
You don't have to. Did you? Did everybody switch them? What did you switch? 18 and 7. Okay, so you did 21x cubed minus 7x. Like this? All right, we'll do that. So then we group the first 2 together, and what do they have in common? A 7 and an x, right? So we'd break out 3x squared minus 1. Remember, if you take everything out, you have to have a 1 there. Our second set has a 6, so plus 6, 3x squared minus 1. So then, remember what you want is parentheses to be the same. So 3x squared minus 1, and if I take that out, I'm left with 7x plus 6. So you guys are going to have a quiz over 6.1 today. Problems like this. Questions on those? Okay, we are going to move to factoring trinomials today. So trinomials are when we're going to have 3. We're going to have our x squared plus bx plus c. We're going to start, and this number in front of the x is always going to be a 1. So we'll start with our easier ones. So when we do this, what we want to find 2 numbers with a product, so that multiply to equal c, and then they need to add to equal b. So hopefully you guys remember all the factoring. When we factor them, they're going to have the form, you're going to have 2 parentheses, right? Whatever your variable is, which is usually x, you're always going to have an x here and an x here. And then what you have next is the 2 numbers that you found from part 1. So it's either going to be x minus something or x plus something in each one of them, depending on what we have. Okay, so if we look, we're just going to do some examples. If we look at the first one, x squared plus 14x plus 48. So here's how I think about it. If you can just look at it and you know the answer, that's perfectly fine. But what we need 2 numbers that multiply to give me 48 and add to give me 14. So what numbers would multiply to get 48 and add to get 14? Any thoughts? What? 8 and 6. Right? They multiply to 48, they add to 14. So that means we're going to write it with our 2 sets of parentheses. So this is just going to be x plus 8 and x plus 6. Okay, part B over here, same thing. We need to multiply to get 144, and we need to add to get negative 24. So, yep. So if I need to add to get a negative and multiply to get a positive, that means both my numbers need to be negative. So I heard out there negative 12 and negative 12. Sometimes the hardest part is finding your numbers. Those multiply to 144, they add to negative 24. So when you write this, that's x minus 12 and x minus 12. What's another way to write that? Yep. which is how you're going to see it the majority of the time. X minus 12 squared. Questions on those two? Part C, same type of thing. This time I need to multiply to get -8, and I need to add to get 7. Smaller numbers this time. So when I need to multiply to get a negative, that means one of my numbers will be negative and one of my numbers will be positive. What? 8 and -1? They multiply to -8 and they add to 7, right? So it doesn't matter what order you put them in, x plus 8, x minus 1. You can write it x minus 1, x plus 8. Either way is fine. All right, see if you can do part D. Numbers that multiply to -12 and add to -1. We find two numbers, -4 and +3. That multiplies to -12, adds to -1. So x minus 4, x plus 3. Everybody remember factoring from last year? You guys spent a lot of time on factoring, so hopefully. Okay, so those are ones, notice those all had an x squared and they didn't have a number in front of it. Well, what if it does have a number in front of it? Today we're going to start easy. If today it has a number in front of it, that means we have to factor out the GCF first. So factor out your GCF and then factor like what we were just doing. Those will be the only options that you have on today's homework. You won't have to do the AC method or anything like that. So if we look at some examples, if I look at part A right here in example 2, what's the GCF that can come out? A 3 and x squared. So that would leave me with x squared minus 6x plus 8. And then we're going to do the same thing now that we were just doing up above with what's left in parentheses. So when we look at it, what multiplies to give me 8 and adds to give me -6. -2 and what? -4. They multiply to 8, they add to 6. So now when you have your answer, you have to keep what you factored out also. So keep the 3x squared, and then the x minus 2, and the x minus 4. So we're just adding the step of factoring out a GCF. How about part B? What would I factor out? An x squared. Sometimes it's not a number, it might just be a variable, so I'm left with x squared plus 2x plus 5. And now look at what's in parentheses. I would need to multiply to get 5 and add to get 2. Are there any numbers that multiply to give me 5 and add to give me 2? Nope. So sometimes you might be done right there and you might not be able to factor it down any further. That would be like what we were doing in 6-1 when we were just taking out the GCF, but now we have to check to see if we can do more. Okay, how about part C? What are we going to factor out? A 2. So I'm left with x squared minus 3x minus 54. Then we need to look at what we multiply to get a -54 and add to get a -3. So remember, if you have a TI calculator, do you guys remember how to figure out different factors of numbers? If you have the TI 83 or 84, you can do your y equals and whatever your number is, so -54 over x, and look at your table. And then your table gives you all the different numbers that multiply to give you 54. It's a little helpful thing first if you struggle with what multiplies. Anybody? Yep, -9 times 6 in this case. So then this would be keep the 2, x minus 9, x plus 6. How about part D? What can we factor out of that? A 4 and an xy, yes. Take out a 4xy, I'm left with y squared plus 3y minus 18. So check to see if I can factor any more. Is there anything that multiplies to -18 that adds to 3? -6 and 3, correct. So keep your 4xy.
How's that add to 3?
Oh, +6, -3. Good catch. That one adds to 3. Had the signs wrong. Y plus 6. Y minus 3. Questions on those? All right, last one we have is what happens if there are 2 variables in your problem, like part A right here on number 3. I have an x squared and a y squared. So when we do this, you're going to factor it the same way we were just looking at. You can think about just ignoring the y's for a second. So what in here would multiply to give me -20, factor it the same way, and add to give me -1? What 2 numbers would do that?
5 and 4.
Which one needs to be negative?
5.
Yep. So -5 and 4, multiply to -20, add to -1. The only difference is when you have 2 variables, we're going to have our x minus our 5. But if I have that second variable, I'm just going to add that variable with a number right there. And then x plus 4y. So we're just adding a variable. There's some bad parentheses. Add that second variable with your numbers that you find. That's all you have to do. So over here, we're doing the same thing. Multiplies to -42. Adds to +1 this time. 7 and 6. Which one's negative? 6, right? So that means I'm going to have a plus 7. Whoops, plus 7b. Forgot my b in there. And a minus 6b. So just add that variable to the back of your numbers. Questions?